There's still plenty we don't know about the Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater remake titled Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater. We saw this teaser trailer about a week ago. We saw some in-game screenshots, and I gotta say, all of that stuff does look pretty good, and we did recently get the revelation that the development team behind this remake is none other than Konami's internal development team in combination with Virtuos, who are acting as a support studio, and they've acted as a support studio for other AAA titles as well, from the Horizon series, from Guerrilla to Uncharted, you name it. And so I'll be very curious to see how all of this turns out. I'd be a little more confident about this remake if it was being developed by, say, Bluepoint. Konami just hasn't made a AAA game in a long time, focusing more on mobile games and microtransactions. And the ones that they did make, like Metal Gear Survive, well, I don't need to recount that story. Not ruling out this MGS3 remake, I'm excited about the prospects of its potential, but I don't want to get my hopes too high up until I see it in motion, until I get my hands on it, until I can be sure that there is genuine potential here and that Konami will treat this remake right. So far, so good, though. Now, one of the big questions out there is Hideo Kojima involved in any way, shape, or form in this remake? I think the answer to that is going to be pretty obvious, but we didn't have official confirmation until now. This right here is an article from news outlet IGN titled Metal Gear Solid 3 Remake Devs on Whether Kojima's Involved and Why They Picked This Game. They actually managed to get a hold of the development team behind this MGS3 remake and asked them some questions, which they did respond to. This article was published on May 30th, 2023, and scrolling down, we have the big question, is Hideo Kojima involved? And IGN also asked if Yoji Shinkawa was involved. Yoji Shinkawa is the lead artist behind the entire Metal Gear series. He's kind of the other side to the Hideo Kojima coin. Those two are like this. If Hideo Kojima is the visionary, then Yoji Shinkawa is the one who actually brings the vision to life in tangible form through his art, and it defines so much of the tone and the aesthetics of Hideo Kojima's games. When asked if either of those two are involved in the MGS3 remake, Konami plain and simply said they are not involved. However, the development team will work hard to create this remake and also the ports for Metal Gear Solid Master Collection so that they can be enjoyed on multiple platforms by even more players all around the world. None of this should come as any surprise. The chances of Hideo Kojima being involved were extremely low given the very public fallout between Kojima and Konami, and it's apparent that those wounds have not fully mended, if they ever will. There's still likely a lot of friction and animosity between these two entities. Given the way Konami treated Kojima on his way out, it almost felt like personal. And on Kojima's side of things, I feel like he just doesn't want to revisit a partnership with Konami given what happened. He just kind of wants to move on, focus on Death Stranding, which is exactly what he's been doing, and just kind of move on from Metal Gear. Don't get me wrong, it would have been really cool to see Hideo Kojima and Yoji Shinkawa at the very least consult in some way on this project, but there's zero involvement from them, which yes, sucks, but again, just not unexpected. And hopefully, because this project is not a brand new game, but rather a remake, it's something that the development team will be able to handle. Just follow the blueprint that's already there. You don't have to tweak anything or overhaul anything. Just modernize what needs to be modernized and retain the substance of what makes this game so special and such a masterpiece. And the developers have expressed that that's their goal, so that's good. Now it's a matter of whether they can execute. Hopefully, this will turn out to be a success story akin to Dead Space Remake and Resident Evil 4 Remake. Remakes that did not have the original creators involved, but were very faithful to the original games, very respectful of them, and struck a great balance of retaining the core essence of those games while improving on things that maybe haven't aged as well. And with RE4 Remake, this was like a top-to-bottom remake, a reimagining, if you will, but it turned out to be pretty successful. But yeah, I think Kojima's involvement would have made this remake feel just more official. Kojima's just so synonymous with Metal Gear. It's such a uniquely Kojima voice that him not being involved at all just diminishes the remake's credibility a little bit without his stamp of approval. But if this development team does a really good job with this and people are satisfied and it makes us fall in love with MGS3 all over again, then they'll have done their jobs, and that's what we're keeping our fingers crossed for. This interview also provided further details as to who exactly is making this game. Again, the central role will be taken on by Konami developers, but there are also team members from past Metal Gear games who will be involved. These are Konami developers who have been involved in the production of the past games in the Metal Gear series. So at least that's kind of encouraging, though do keep in mind that Metal Gear Survive was developed by folks who worked on past games in the series, and we all know how that turned out, which is why I'm still not fully sold on this. But they do have a certain familiarity having worked on past games in the series, and this is, again, a remake. They're not trying to remold what Metal Gear is or trying to create something brand new. They just have to follow the masterpiece of a blueprint that's already there and just modernize gameplay elements and visuals and graphics and you name it. Konami also highlighted that the support studio Virtuos was involved in the production of previous entries in the Metal Gear series as well, so there seems to be a familiarity of this series within this team that I hope will permeate into the creation of a game that really does feel faithful, but also revitalizes the game in a way that will make it feel both familiar and fresh. IGN also asked the team why they chose to start with Metal Gear Solid 3 instead of, say, Metal Gear Solid 1. In the early days of rumors surrounding a Metal Gear Solid remake, a lot of people thought that MGS1 would be the one to receive the remake treatment, but it turned out to be MGS3. The response that Konami provided reads as follows: "We chose MGS3 Snake Eater because it depicts the birth of Big Boss, Naked Snake, which is the starting point of the Metal Gear series. Another reason is that many fans have been requesting a remake of this game for a long time." Metal Gear Solid already does have a remake in the form of the GameCube title Twin Snakes, which I do personally think is inferior to the original PS1 version. Just the way they retweaked the cutscenes to be all overly stylized, all very like Matrixy. The music is nowhere near as good, and there's just something about it that doesn't quite click with me like the original PS1 version did. But either way, MGS1 does already have a remake, and not to mention that I actually do agree that MGS3 being the origin story of the entire Metal Gear saga, it actually makes a lot of sense to start here. If you think about it, you don't have to play any other game in the series to dive into Metal Gear Solid 3's story and understand it. It can be its own isolated thing because it kickstarts everything else. It's a good place to start for newcomers to the series. Even with like Metal Gear Solid 1, if you think about it, to understand some of its plot elements, you have to play Metal Gear 1 and 2 to know about Gray Fox and Big Boss and all of these things. MGS3 can genuinely stand on its own, and many consider it to be the best story in the series and the best game in the series. The controls haven't aged as well, the gameplay could use some tweaking, so if they can improve those things, this could be a perfected experience. So I actually think it's a good move to start with MGS3. One last question that they answered was whether we can expect more Metal Gear remakes after Metal Gear Solid Delta. Their response was, regarding remakes of previous games in the series other than Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, we will listen to player demand and consider accordingly. I imagine that how well Metal Gear Solid Delta does, how well it's received, how well it sells, that will define whether Konami greenlights another Metal Gear remake project. And so it'll be up to Konami to deliver an experience that will spread positive word of mouth about this series and about future potential remakes and get us excited for the prospect of future remakes if they manage to nail this one. So we'll see what happens. And then to close things off, one last thing I want to update you guys on is on the topic of whether voice actors from the original game will return and whether it's a case of them returning to re-record lines or whether they're returning in the sense of old voice lines from the original game will be reused for the remake. Konami's kept it kind of vague or used language that could have multiple interpretations. They said in this statement here that the remake will star the original voice characters, which could be interpreted as we're going to bring the same voice actors in to re-record lines, or the same voice actors are in the game in the sense that we're just reusing what they've already recorded. Same thing with this tweet that reads, the story and character voices in Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater remain the same from the original game. But what do you mean by character voices? Are you talking about the actors or the recorded lines? A lot of people interpreted those statements to mean that they will not be recording new lines, that they will be reusing the lines, the recordings, the performances that are already there in the original Snake Eater, and that interpretation we now know officially is the correct one, as reported here by BBC's Newsbeat outlet. Now, the headline I think can be a little misleading, where it says that Metal Gear Solid 3 Remake voice actors not invited back. This could potentially be interpreted as they're recasting characters for Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater. What this is actually saying is that the original voice actors have not been booking sessions to record new lines for this game, which is further clarified in the article itself, which reads, Newsbeat contacted most of the English language voice cast or their agents to ask if they'll be re-recording their parts. Neil Ross, who played main enemy Colonel Volgin, said he had heard nothing from Konami about the remake. Another co-star had a similar response. You can put two and two together there. Konami saying that the old voices are back, but the voice actors themselves have not been recording new lines, so they're just going to reuse the performances that already exist. And The Verge puts the final nail in the coffin on this topic with their article, whose headline reads, "The Metal Gear Solid 3 Remake will reuse the original game's voice lines with no changes." Scrolling further down, it is clarified here that the game will reuse the voice lines from the original game with no changes, according to Tommy Williams, Konami's head of communications for the Americas. So this is official confirmation from Konami, not just an investigation from BBC's Newsbeat outlet. There's definitely a part of me that's like, it would have been cool to get these voice actors to return as their respective characters after so long. But at the same time, Metal Gear Solid 3 is so sacred that the safer route, I'd say, is definitely to not re-record when the performances there are already so solid, so beloved, just so great. Why fix what ain't broken? I think there's a greater chance for the MGS3 remake to become controversial if they re-record lines, because some voice actors might sound a little different because it's been decades since the original MGS3 came out, and even if their voices are the same, adjusting the performance could be for better or for worse. Fans might debate, man, I preferred the original version of this line or of this scene compared to the newly recorded lines, the newly recorded performances. Fans are still debating that between the original PS1 version of Metal Gear Solid 1 and the Twin Snakes version on GameCube. If the goal is to remain faithful to the original game and to maintain the substance of what made the original game special with this remake, then I think this is the correct route. The unfortunate thing, though, is that since they're reusing lines from the original game, it's likely that the actors who play those characters won't get paid for the remake, even though their work is being used for a brand new game release. Unfortunately, that's just the realm of voice acting. Voice actors get screwed over a lot when it comes to financial negotiations. It's unfortunate, and hopefully that's something that can change over the years. But in terms of what this remake needs to be successful, I think it's best to not mess with things that don't need to be messed with, and those original performances are pretty freaking great. Though I don't know if you think you can make a case for why they should just bring back the actors and re-record the performances. Feel free to let me know in the comments below. For now, though, in the meantime, this is everything you need to know about the latest updates surrounding what Konami has confirmed about the Metal Gear Solid remake. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on this remake after having learned this information. Does it move the needle for you in terms of how excited you are about this remake or how much you trust it? Or does this not make any difference? Are you generally looking forward to seeing how this remake will turn out, or are you completely skeptical about Konami's ability to deliver? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.